Alright, this is lesson 37, simplifying rational expressions. Same from last week. When we see the word rational, it means fractional or fraction expressions. So, remember last week we were like, oh, 7 over 21, it's like 1/3, right? But why is it 1/3? It's because we could factor out a 7 from each the numerator and the denominator. So the numerator is 7 times 1, the denominator is 7 times 3. So we could cancel each of these out, so it's 1 over 3, right? Now there's a new word. Well, it's not really, it shouldn't be new to you, but there's a word here called undefined that we were supposed to go over last lesson. Okay? What's undefined mean? You want to remember? Okay, it's when a number is divided by 0. Okay? So like 1 divided by 0. What's 1 divided by 0? No, it's undefined. Okay? 0 divided by 1 is 0, but what's 1 divided by 0? Undefined. So let me give you an idea. So like, let's say we had no pizza. Let's say Mr. Rink had no pizza. 0 pizzas. Well, actually, no. That's going to be confusing. Let's say I had 1 pizza. It's over there. Okay, 1 pizza. There's 8 people. How much pizza does each person get? 1/8, right? Little slice of pizza, right? Makes sense? Now let's say there's 1 pizza. 2 people, how much pizza does each person get? Half the pizza, right? Let's say there's 1 pizza, and there's just 1 person. How much pizza does that 1 person get? The whole pizza, right? Now let's say there's 1 pizza, and there's no one around. How much pizza does each person get?
None.
It's undefined because there's no people to eat the pizza. It's just sitting there. There's no one's going to get pizza. It's undefined, right? Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's illogical, right? It doesn't work. So the same thing with math. Whenever we have something divided by 0, it is undefined, okay? So let's say we had a fraction, 1 over x. Let's say this was our expression. We don't want this to be undefined, so how do I make, what value would x have to be equal to for this to be undefined? 1. Well, no, because 1 divided by 1 is 1. So which value would not make, or which value would make this undefined? 0, right? Can x be equal to 1? What happens if x is equal to 1 here? What's the answer? 1 over 1. What happens if x is equal to 2? 1/2. 3? 1 and 4? I could pick any number, right? But what happens if I pick x as 0? What happens to my fraction here? Undefined. Do we like undefined in math? No. So then we would identify that as a excluded value. We'd say this is a fraction, but we don't want x to be equal to 0 because what happens if x is 0? It's undefined. Okay. Okay. So the same steps as last week. We didn't really, the same steps as last week. I don't really, we didn't really talk about number 1 here, or step 1, which is set the denominator equal to 0 to find any excluded value. So we're going to focus on that today. And then the problem's going to be a little bit harder, so it might be a little bit confusing, okay? So here are a couple of problems here. So we have an exponential rational expression, number 1. Number 2 is polynomial rational expression. Okay, so number 1. Okay, we want to organize this out a little bit before we start identifying undefined or any excluded values. So I'm going to rewrite this. I'm going to have the numerator stay the same because there's nothing I could do in the numerator. But the denominator, I have all of this denominator all raised to the 2nd power. So I know that 2 squared is 4. A to the negative 1st squared is going to be a to the negative 2nd power. B to the 2nd power is b to the 2nd power. And c squared raised to the 2nd power is c to the 4th. Okay? Then we have a to the negative power. Remember from a couple months ago, a negative power, we just have to flip it to the opposite side of the fraction. Since it's in the denominator, I'm going to put it in the numerator. We already have a squared in the numerator, so we're going to bring another a squared up here, which is going to be a to the 4th. So we got 2a to the 4th, b to the 3rd over c, all over 4b squared, c to the 4th, okay? Now in my denominator, I know that if I have b equal to 0, 0 times anything is 0, and that would make my denominator 0, which would make this undefined. So I know that in the back of my head that b cannot equal to 0. Also c, what happens if c is equal to 0? It's going to multiply out and make this whole denominator equal to 0. So I know that c is not going to be equal to 0 either. Okay? So I'm going to simplify this out, and I'm going to remember those excluded values. 2 goes into each of these, so it's going to be 1 over 2. In regards to the b's, b to the squared is smaller than b to the third, so we got b squared. This b cancel out in the denominator. B to the third, take out 2, which was going to be equal to b to the first. Same thing here. We got c to the first over c to the fourth. C to the first is smaller. Cancel that out. Cancel 1 out of the denominator. We got c to the third. And then we're going to rewrite our answer a to the fourth, b to the first, all over 2c to the third. And then we know that our excluded values, remember we said b cannot equal to 0 and c cannot equal to 0. That's your answer, okay? That's how we do number 1, okay? That's an example of excluded values on number 1. Question? Yeah.
You have to write b.
Yeah, you have to identify the excluded values. We didn't emphasize that. We didn't talk about step 1 last week, and we didn't talk about step 4, which is the excluded values. Okay?
How do you know which one to use?
You set the denominator equal to 0, and you figure out anything that would make the denominator equal to 0. I'll talk about it here on number 2. Okay? Number 2. Okay, we have x squared minus 4 all over x plus 2 times x minus 2 to the negative first power. This denominator has a negative power, so I want to move anything in the denominator that has a negative power to the numerator. The numerator is a difference of squares, so I'm going to factor it out. X squared minus 4 is like saying x plus 2 times x minus 2. Okay? And then I'm going to move this x minus 2 to the negative first power up to the numerator. So I'm going to write another time x minus 2 in the numerator. And then the denominator, I have x plus 2. Okay? So looking at this denominator, what would make this denominator equal to 0? What do you think? What? No. What would be a value for x that would make it equal to 0? Negative 2, right? Do you all agree? How did we figure that out? You just take the denominator, do a side problem. X plus 2 is equal to 0, right? And then we solve for x. We subtract 2 on both sides. We say x cannot equal to negative 2, okay? Going a little faster on here. Because what happens if x is equal to negative 2? What's negative 2 plus 2? What happens if my denominator is 0? Thank you, good. Okay, so now we just start canceling things out. X plus 2 cancels out, leaving just x minus 2 in the numerator. I'm going to just multiply that out. So we have x minus 2 times x minus 2 is going to be x squared minus 4x plus 4. And then I'm going to write my answer with a semicolon. And we're saying x cannot equal to negative 2. Because this expression is the exact same thing as this expression. These are both the same. This one's the simplified version. This is the original one. And we're saying in this expression we don't want this to be a value because then it'll be undefined. Okay? A little confusing. It'll get easier as we do a few more. Okay? So why don't we have you turn to your neighbors. 1 slow 2 is about number 1, and then 2 slow 1 is about number 2. Okay? Ready, set, go. Continuing on. Pull out your iPads, please. We're going to do a couple of these. You can also do these in your notes if you like to write these down. Okay. So the first thing you want to do on this one, okay, what's step 1? Turn to your neighbor, explain what step 1 is. Read it to them. Did you cover your mouth? Okay, make sure you cover your mouth, please. Ugh. Okay. You could dislike this video if you don't like people who don't cover their mouths. Okay, so here we go. 30n squared minus 60n. Okay, so we're going to take the denominator, set it equal to 0. I'm going to do a little bit of side problem here, okay? Okay, so this, just working on this denominator, I moved it here, I set it equal to 0. We need to solve for n. What can I factor out of this left-hand side? 30n. Okay, so we're going to factor out 30n. Okay. Now we're going to use the zero product property. We got 30n is equal to 0 and n minus 2 is equal to 0. Okay. This first one I could divide both sides by 30, which means n is equal to 0, and the second one I'm going to add 2 to both sides. Okay. Now look in here. These are my two solutions for the denominator, right? Let me just prove to you why this works. Look up here. Let's say I put 0 into my denominator. What's 0 squared? What's 0 times 30? Good. What's 60 times 0? What's 0 minus 0? What happens if my denominator is equal to 0? Undefined, right? Do we want it to be undefined? No. So we say that 0 is an excluded value. Okay? Let's try 2. 2 squared is? 4 times 30 is? 120. Good. 120, right? What's negative 60 times 2? Negative 120. What's 120 minus 120? 0. Do we want our denominator equal to 0? No, we don't. So this is now an excluded value. We're going to say that this cannot be one of the solutions, okay? So now we're going to go back to our original problem, looking at the numerator. What can I factor out of the numerator on my next step? What can I factor out of the numerator, everyone? What? 30 and think bigger, not 3. Okay. The denominator, didn't we already factor out the denominator? Yeah, right here, you see? 30n times n minus 2. Let's just copy this part right here. Right down here. We already did that work, so we need to do it again. Okay. What can I simplify out of both of these?
30n.
Okay, so now we have n minus 1 times n minus 2. I got a question for you. Look up here. Can I cancel the two n's out here? Yes or no?
No.
Turn your neighbor, explain why. Okay, why can't I? Why can't I simplify? Why can't I simplify? No, everyone. Why can't I simplify those two n's? Because they're in what? Good. Okay, because they're in parentheses. Okay, so we can't use them. We're assuming there are parentheses around that, so we have n minus 1 and n minus 2. And so we're just assuming that they're there, so we can't cancel those out. Then we're just going to write our final answer, semicolon, n is equal to 0, and n cannot equal to 2, right? Because if these values are added to my original problem or my final answer, it would make it the problem undefined. Okay? Makes sense? Okay, number 2. On number 2, we have 5b minus 40 over 2b squared minus 21b plus 40. First step, take the denominator, and we're just going to make a side problem set equal to 0. So I'm just going to do my work right here. Everyone, you can work along with me. Just work along with your notes. Or your notes, Nick. Okay, so we got 2b squared minus 21b plus 40 is equal to 0. Okay, we're going to do an x box here to factor. Okay, what's my a on this example here for my denominator? 2, good. So we have 2 and 2. A times c is 80, and b is negative 21. Okay, I want you to tell me what are two factors I get to multiply to be positive 80 but add up to negative 21. Go. So we're going to use negative 16 and negative 5, and then we could simplify the 2 and negative 16 to be 1 and negative 8. And then we're just rewriting this. B minus 8 times 2b minus 5 is equal to 0. zero product property, right? Remember this a few weeks ago? So b is equal to 8, and b is equal to 5/2, okay? But are these the answers? Are these the answers to my problem? No, what are these called again? It's excluded values. So all you got to do is just put your, mark these off, the equal signs out with a line through them like that, okay? Now we're going to go back to the original problem. 5b minus 40, look at that numerator at the top on number 4. What can I factor out of that numerator at the top? 5, good. So we're going to factor out a 5. We've got b minus 8 all over. And then I'm just going to take the factored form that I had earlier. I'm going to rewrite it here too, right? Do I have to refactor it the second time through? Do I have to do all that work again to factor it? No, we're just copying what we did here over there. Okay, what can I simplify out of both the numerator and denominator? What? b minus 8. Okay. So we have 5 over 2b minus 5. Okay. Got a question? Can I factor out the two 5s here? Nope. Why not? Parentheses, good. So you're going to write 5 over 2b minus 5. Semicolon b cannot equal to 8, and it cannot equal to 5/2. Okay. And that's it. So all we're doing is simplifying fractions, and we're calling out or identifying excluded values. Okay? Questions on numbers 3 or 4? All right, that concludes the lesson.